So I wanted to talk a little bit about the inauguration and what seeing images from this inauguration made me think about. Because when you looked at the folks that were backing up the president-elect, I don't think I'd ever seen anything like this before in my life, where the actual patrons, where the actual signs of political support for the president are just like back there. And these are some mondo people like Elon Musk, who literally pays $250 million to get the president's ear, right? This was some mondo corruption stuff. And now liberals are actually starting to talk about oligarchy, right? We get to talk about oligarchy now because liberals are talking about oligarchy. Progressives have been talking about American oligarchy for 150 years, right? Something like that, 160 years. So, you know, everybody else is a little bit late to the game on this, but welcome to the party. Let's talk a little bit about American oligarchs. And those oligarchs look a lot different than they used to. I mean, oligarchs have always been around in the United States, and they've always purchased political privilege and political access, right? But at least they tried to be a little bit quiet about it. They weren't in your face with it like this particular crowd is. This particular crowd is different, and they're a lot more secure with their position in being able to use their wealth to gain access to the seats of power, right? And what are we looking at? Well, it got me thinking about my buddy Yanis Varoufakis and his book, Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. And Yanis Varoufakis' thesis is basically that capitalism as we know it is done. He's pulling a little bit from that Marxist tradition. I'm not saying this is a Marxist book, but he's pulling a little bit from that Marxist tradition, right? Where you have ancient slave systems, and therefore ownership of the slaves is what drew wealth and power and access. And then you had feudalism, and ownership of land is what was driving that. And then you had capitalism, where possessing capital and finance was what was driving access and driving the means of production. And people's relationship with the means of production, this is a central Marxist claim, people's relation to the means of production is what shaped human behavior, right? And now what do we see? We see now that really the guys at the top of the economic food chain right now, they're not necessarily your financiers, your Wall Street guys. They're the folks that control data systems. They're the folks that control AI and virtual reality, right? And this data becomes their property, right? This data is what drives the means of production in this new economy, according to Varoufakis. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I think it's some interesting stuff. And how that shapes our behaviors, our relations to the means of production in this case, how that shapes our behaviors. And Varoufakis' claim is that we've entered into this new economic system. Capitalism is going the way of the dodo, and now this new techno-feudalism is happening. And this techno-feudalism looks a lot more like old school feudalism than it does capitalism. Yes, you got these guys that are very wealthy. They're flying around in jets, the whole 9 yards. That looks like capitalism, but that's what wealthy people have always looked like. But what's driving it is these data systems, ownership of these data systems, which has created markets that look more like the serfdoms of feudalism than they do like capital markets, in which you have folks like me and you, if you're watching this video, which you are, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you, are basically data serfs, right? Giving away our labor. I'm not getting paid for this. You know, I'm doing this for nothing. Giving away our labor that is then owned by the techno-feudalists, right? And then they use that to drive wealth, to drive their wealth access and to drive their political access. It's a really powerful critique, and it's a powerful book. It's an interesting book, and an interesting take on our situation as it stands right now. Because one of the driving forces of left movements is yes, capitalism will come to an end through some means, and then what's going to replace it? And of course, the left critique and the left mission is that whatever replaces it is a small d democratic system. And that doesn't look like that's what's going on right now.